Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I recently built and installed this custom microwave cabinet. Holds the appliance and takes advantage of what little space is remaining for storage. I broke this build into two videos. This one here focuses more on the cabinet in general, and the other video focuses a little bit more of the details on the drawers and particularly the divider. There's a door here to hold long things. Drawer here with the soft close mechanism. And down low in the toe kick there's also a shallow drawer. The carcass is made out of wood and plywood. Door and drawer fronts are made out of hardwood, a little bit of MDF and plywood. The drawers themselves are made out of plywood. Let me give you a quick overview of how we put it all together. So I'm laying out the lines where the mortises and dados are going to go. This is mirror images of the two sides, and it gives you a good opportunity when you see it in real life to double check your calculations. I already found a mistake. I subtracted a couple numbers and somehow came up with the wrong number. So this is the front edge of one of the sides, and here's the rabbet where the top is going to go in, and here's the rabbet where the shelf is. There's going to be a face frame that goes over this. And I put a little mark here where the face frame is going to come down to, and this area is going to have a microwave slide into it. So the most critical dimension is the bottom of the face frame up here down to where the shelf is, and this has to be a big enough number, and that's looking pretty good. That's pretty much a perfect fit. I made a mistake on this piece, even though I marked it to cut the dado from here down to the dashed line. When I went to cut it, I lined it up on the other side, and what I did was I glued in a patch, and I think to make it look good in the future I'm going to have to paint the inside of the cabinet in this area. This unfortunately will be visible. I had other options, none of them were great. I could have used this piece as the partition between the microwave section of the cabinet and the rest. Patch would have still been visible, and it seemed as though it was a lot of work to have to remake this piece, so I think I'm gonna go with this plan. And luckily I discovered this mistake before I cut the same mistake on the other piece. So the sheet of plywood is still a little too big for me to comfortably cut on my table saw, even with my extended fence. So I have my track saw jig set up. I'm gonna almost cut it perfectly in half, taking 10 or 15 minutes just to set up for this one cut. This is one of those cuts where it's really convenient to have the track saw capability. I have to walk as I cut and bend over it and extend myself, and it's nice to have the saw locked in the track, so that's one less thing I have to focus on. So here's another cut where the table saw is not a viable option. I have this really large piece and I need to cut a pretty good sized piece off of it. So I have this simple fence clamped to it, and I'm going to clean up this edge. This is nice and square now. Here are the two shelves for the cabinet. They're exactly cut to the same width using my rip fence extension, and I want them to fit in these two dados, and I need them to be 22 3/4 inches. So I measure the distance from the blade to the fence. That's the cut I want to make, and I reference it to the inside edge of the miter slot, and then I line it up on both ends with a couple friendly taps with the rubber mallet. Instead of running this over my joiner, just think it's easier to hit it with the joiner plane. So here's a view of the carcass, work in progress. All of the big sheet pieces have been cut along with the support pieces. So here is the face frame. It's just taped together and held up by a clamp in each corner, and it's all looking good. Off camera I drilled pocket holes in the back of all the pieces on the face frame. The faces are very smooth, but the edges are particularly bad. I just took a couple minutes to put a new edge on my Defiance hand plane. We'll give this guy a shot. Number 4. Cutting a little heavy on the right. Coax the iron the other way a little. And there's a shaving, and that is smooth as glass. This style here I had to mill out of a particularly bowed piece of wood, and if I put a steel edge on it, it's up on the edges, not very much, maybe a 16th to a 32nd of an inch or so. I'm not going to get it all out, but my technique is I start planing in the middle, take a pass, and then I slowly work it out a little. And hopefully by the time I'm getting a shaving across the whole thing, I've taken a little bit more off the middle. And on the other side, I'm going to do the opposite. This style is going to be on the outside of the cabinet where it's not butting up to another cabinet. So if one style is not perfectly straight, this would be the one. This piece is the upper back of the cabinet, and it's got quite a complicated bit of milling on it. But this is the piece that you're going to screw into in the back of the cabinet to attach to the wall. And this dado here is to house the divider. And the top will come over and glue and screw to the back here, so this will form an L bracket, and there'll be a strong connection for the upper back of the cabinet. And there'll be a dado in the top which will also support the divider. And finally on this end we have a rabbet here, and there's a groove cut in here, and the rabbet is to allow this to sit flush on the back of the cabinet where there's a dado that's a 1/2 inch thick. This is 3/4, so I got a 1/4 of an inch. That also helps me with the dado over here. And the groove here is to support the back of the cabinet, which is going to be a 1/4 inch thick plywood. So this shelf has a first coat of polyurethane on it. Just using a scraper. And I was careful not to polyurethane the very edge where it's going to be glued. Here's the back panel all glued up and has a coat of polyurethane on both sides. Like I did before, I laminated a second rail of 5mm plywood on top of the 5mm back. I'm going to put some screws through the back to support this shelf. The microwave is going to sit here, and I'm a little leery that over the years the weight of the microwave might cause this shelf to sag a little bit, so I'm trying to give a little bit extra support. Don't think it's a big concern. It's 3/4 inch plywood and it's good plywood, so I think it's pretty strong, and the microwave weighs a fair amount but doesn't weigh that much. But again, if enough years goes by, I think it would be prudent to try to give that shelf a little bit extra support. So here's the spacer on the left hand side, and here's the one on the right hand side that is similar. I have this little jig here, just a couple pieces of narrow stock clamped together, and when I measure the inside dimension from spacer to spacer, it's exactly 31 inches, which is great. So I'll have a 1/2 inch for each drawer glide, which means I have to make the drawer 30 inches. Here are the two drawer glides installed on this one. This glide here is just resting on the bottom of the cabinet, and over here I lifted it up off the bottom of the cabinet by this stirring stick used as a spacer. So here it is at another stage of assembly. Down on the toe kick we have a drawer, and it draws in, and up in the main part of the cabinet there's a nice big drawer. I assemble these drawers as just plywood butt joints. If you were to hit this face here outward, it would pop the glue joint. I think the easiest way to reinforce it is to put a dowel through the end of the plywood, sitting about there. I'm going to have two. One sits about right there and one will sit in the middle about right there. I think that's the easiest and best way to reinforce a joint like this. I think it's similar in strength to a dovetail, and it will help prevent this from kicking out, although I don't think that's the biggest issue. Somebody could hit that with a pot or a pan. More importantly, this front piece is going to be pulled on and pushed on, and that needs to be strong, and the dowel's going in that direction. The way these two boards are oriented will provide an awful lot of strength. And it's very noticeable. You can easily see the round dowel end grain in it. I don't think it's ugly, and it's certainly very practical. And this bottom piece is 1/2 inch plywood, and it's glued all the way around, so I think the bottom of the drawer is particularly strong. The weakest points are up here as you get away from the glue joint at the bottom. So using a marking gauge and an awl, I mark where I want to drill. And I put this on the drawer to act as a drilling gauge because I really want to make sure I'm in line with the plywood. Glue on the plug, and here's a view of what the dowels look like finished. So sitting here on my table saw, this is $70 worth of wood. And I'll tell you, this piece here is terrible. You know, look at the grain on it. It's got tear out over here. And this face looks like they didn't even quite get it to the joiner. It's so crooked. And they've got twists and warps in them. But it was the best piece I could get. And I paid a lot of money for it. So, good on all fronts. I just ripped these to width on the table saw, and I could bring it over to my joiner to clean up the edge, and then I'd have the joiner marks to contend with. Just think it's going to be easier to clean it up a little bit with a hand plane. This is my Stanley number 3. I cut the tongues on these boards, and my dado stack doesn't give me the cleanest cut, but my number 75 bullnose plane, kind of the perfect tool. Shave that ridge off. So here is the cabinet finished, and I didn't record a lot of the final steps because they're pretty straightforward. I have soft close hinges. You can see it slowly closing, and these drawers pull in all on their own. And the only thing that remains is there needs to be a hole cut in the back to access the outlet, and it needs to be installed. You can see the outlet. It's going to power the microwave. I ended up putting a little detail down here to cover the toe kick drawer face, just to disguise it a little bit. And that repair that I showed you earlier in the video is sitting right down there in the corner, and for all intents and purposes it is invisible. Don't forget to check out the other video on this build. Well, that's all I have for this one. It's a custom cabinet and very functional. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And as always, take care, stay safe, and keep your eyes out for the next one.